Good evening, and thank you for joining us for this third episode of Season 2 of Veiled Mysteries. Tonight, we are covering the minute-by-minute attack of one of the most horrific school shootings that happened in the United States. On Valentine's Day 2018 in Parkland, Florida, Nicholas Cruz entered Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School with a high-powered, semi-automatic rifle, executing 17 students and faculty and wounding 17 others. The attack that lasted about 6 minutes destroyed a small community that was once awarded the safest city in the state of Florida. Veiled Mysteries chief correspondent and legal analyst Taylor Edwards is here to break down the full event from start to finish, as well as the legal proceedings of Nicholas Cruz following the attack. Please be advised that the following program contains content that many viewers may find disturbing, including gun violence in a public setting, active shooters, and murder. Episode 3 of Veiled Mysteries begins right now.
The following program contains conspiracies and true crime from around the state of Florida that may not be suitable for all audiences. All personal opinions featured in this episode should not be taken as factual evidence. As always, viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this third edition of Veiled Mysteries. I'm here with Chief Legal Analyst and Correspondent Taylor Edwards. Thank you, Taylor, for being with us on this special episode.
Of course. Thanks. Hi, everyone. Welcome in.
So today, like I said in our intro, we are going to be covering the Parkland school shooting. Truly one of the worst school shootings that we've seen, not to date, unfortunately, but throughout school shooting history and throughout violent mass crime in the United States. Just a couple weeks ago, I was able to, on my adventures through South Florida, I went over to the Parkland area, and I do have to say it is truly such a beautiful community. I said in my intro that it was once the safest city in Florida, and I truly believe that. Walking around and seeing that community, it was very touching, and it was heartbreaking to know what heartbreak and what evil entered that community several years ago. But we're going to be talking about that today. Like I said as well, this episode is going to be heavy. We're going to be listening to some audio. We're going to be seeing some body cam footage. So this is going to be a tough episode to get through. So if you have young ones with you or you watch this as a family, this may not be the episode for everybody. So Taylor, let's start at the beginning.
All right. As always, we do have our comments open on YouTube, so feel free to comment in with any questions or comments or anything like that that you have. And then also, you can text either Brandon or myself. We do have our messages up if you don't have the chat or you can't figure it out. And we do have our phone line up as well. So
our phone number is scrolling down at the bottom. As you can see, it is 407-801-7204. We just ask that you text first, and then we'll go ahead and give you a call to hear your thoughts on what we're talking about today.
Of course. So starting from the beginning, on February 14th, 2018, we had Nicholas Cruz, who is 19 at the time. He went to his previous high school. He was expelled because of behavioral and disciplinary issues in 2017, so the year before he was expelled. So he came back and he went to his old high school, Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. And there unfortunately were 17 victims that were killed and over 17 that were injured. And it all happened in the infamous Building 12, which has now been demolished, but it did stay open for, well, not open to the students, but it was still up for the court proceedings because they did a CSI like walkthrough for the jury so they could see the tragedy and walk through exactly what happened. This building was only 3 stories and there were only about 30 classrooms inside of the building. So it was a huge tragedy, and there were so many that were injured and unfortunately killed in such a small area. So Cruz took a Uber to Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and in this Uber he did have a rifle bag with him. Not sure why that wasn't reported or stopped or anything like that. So he did have an AR-15 semi-automatic rifle on him, and he went in and he started from the first floor at around 2:21 and made his way up to the top floor, and the attack lasted about 6 minutes in total. And he also, which I do find this interesting, as he was going up, there was no one on the second floor, so that floor was completely empty. So it was really just the first and the third floors that he went to, but he also pulled the fire alarm to get students to evacuate the building, thinking that that would help. But they were on a code red situation. So that's kind of the basis of what happened. And then we'll kind of go through more of the details as we go through tonight's episode.
We do have a couple aids to kind of go through the attack. We have an animation. This wasn't the animation. They did have an animation made for Nicholas's trial, and it was played to the jury. This isn't the exact one. This looks like it was made by someone just on the internet, but we're going to kind of go through that as well. Which I guess we can kind of start the process of that. Let me get that up here. So you can see on your screen here, you'll be able to see what each kind of refers to. We have uninjured students. Those are going to be mostly the ones that are going into the classrooms or down the hallway. We have the black dot, which is the killed students. The orange dot, that is the injured students. We have like a peach pear color, that is uninjured teachers. We have the gray dot that is the killed teachers. And then we have the dark blue dot that is the injured teachers. And then, of course, at the bottom, we have the bright purple as the shooter. I don't think there's a narration to this. We'll just kind of talk through it.
So one thing that is interesting is this student, the green dot right here. Whenever Nicholas Cruz went into the building, he went to the stairwell first and saw that student and told him that he needed to get out. So he warned that student that he needed to get out of the building and that it was going to get chaotic. So that student was saved by the shooter, which we don't know if there was a relationship between the two, if he knew them, or if he just was flustered and wasn't prepared to see someone right away.
So we have like a little bit of an intro here, and then we'll probably get into it. There are several videos of inside the school from the students. There were a couple that I had started piecing together, and I determined that they were probably too graphic and upsetting for the podcast. If that is something that you're looking for personal study to better understand the issue, they are available on the internet. They are very upsetting.
Yeah, they're very hard to watch. It's very heartbreaking.
Yes.
And hard to imagine that kids of that age, they were 13, 14, 15 maybe max, that went through this. But they are very hard to watch. But social media played a huge role in this.
Let me see if I can find the one from the case, because this one is not like our play-by-play one that I wanted to show. Let's see. This one might be a little bit better to see. This is again not the one from the case here, but this one might be.
So another interesting thing to note is that the teachers had a scheduled code red drill, which code red is the highest level of an alert that a teacher can get about school shootings, or sometimes it's bomb threats, guns are found, unidentified persons. But they did have a scheduled code red drill that they knew either was coming soon or that day. I have a close friend that is a teacher, and she said that for her school, which obviously it's different everywhere, and this was years ago also, but at least for her school now, they know it's on a Thursday or Friday, and they know it's towards the end of the month, but that's really it. So they kind of can like figure out when it's going to happen. So I'm not sure if that was the same thing here or if they knew it was happening that day. But either way, whenever he went into the school, he started shooting in the hallway, not at anyone in particular, but he started shooting into the hallway to try to get people to leave. And one thing that kind of upsets me and was hard to learn about is that one of the teachers, actually, there's a very good documentary on Amazon Prime called Parkland Shooting, Building 12, Inside Building 12. A teacher actually said that because they knew there was a code red drill, they just assumed that it was someone shooting blanks outside of the classroom to make it more realistic. I do know that in some schools and in some areas this does occur, but I don't necessarily think that was the case for this school. Otherwise, I believe more teachers, more students would have commented on that. Because hearing a gun, and even if it's blanks being shot, it sounds pretty much the same as if you're shooting ammunition. And I feel like that would have been a big point in this case of why, like, they just thought it was a drill. Because if they were used to that once a month or even once every other month, then that would have been a point in the case, I believe. So that kind of is upsetting. There also, unfortunately, was a teacher that she let a student go to the restroom. Third floor restrooms were closed off. She went down to the second floor and realized something was going on. She heard the gunshots, went back upstairs and knocked on the door to get back in. And the teacher almost didn't let her back in and was more concerned about failing the drill and getting, I guess, reprimanded for failing this drill over letting the student in. So that also is upsetting, but I mean, I can't say one way or the other how I would have reacted as a teacher in a situation like this. I've never been in a situation like this, thank goodness. I don't know anyone personally who has, so it's kind of hard to say. Also, I'm not a teacher, so I can't really speak on that, but the teacher did almost not let her back in, which would have ended fatally for this student, but she was let back in and she did warn them about what was going on.
Like you said, it's hard to put yourself in the shoes of an administrator, of a faculty member in this sort of situation. But it's also very interesting to understand the heroism of the teachers that did understand that what was going on and did put themselves in harm's way and did sacrifice their lives for their students. We know of one teacher, I don't know off the top of my head, I think his name is Stephen Beagle.
His name is Scott Beagle.
Scott Beagle. Scott Beagle held the door open to his, was he on the third floor?
Yes, I believe so.
He held the door open to his classroom as long as he could and was welcoming students into his classroom that weren't even part of his class to
Just get them out of the hallway.
just to get them out of the hallway. And there was another teacher that had recognized that while the shooter was shooting, his gun had jammed and was making sure students who were leaving the building, not even just going into a classroom, just telling them to get out. He did fortunately survive the attack.
He was injured, but
he was injured, but still going in harm's way to make sure that the students are safe.
Takes a lot of courage.
Absolutely.
Being a teacher, I mean, being anyone really, anyone that puts their lives on that line for them, especially whenever they're not trained to do so, they have no way of protecting themselves. He had no firearms with him. He had no way to apprehend the shooter. That really speaks a lot about someone, and really makes him a hero. Anyone who does that, like I said, is a hero for protecting others and putting themselves in harm's way. So,
absolutely, and we'll talk about this as we go through the event. But this particular shooting changed so much for Florida law, and really started such a broader conversation across the country regarding gun violence, gun control, and things of that nature. But what I found so interesting about this case and why I really wanted to cover it is not only did this happen in Florida, but in so many of these scenarios of we have an active shooter, even outside of schools, just mass shootings in general, Aurora, Colorado, things like that, we don't see the perpetrator necessarily survive the attack. It usually ends in a suicide. There's very limited cases, especially in school shootings, that the perpetrator does end up surviving. So I think the fact that Nikolas Cruz lived through this and is in custody and went through the judicial process, that kind of helped in a way kind of push some of these rules and these laws through for the state of Florida. But before we we'll dive more into that. But before we do that, I do want to listen to the radio transmissions of the 911 operators and the units around the school. We're just going to listen to this a little bit. It is a little long, but we'll just kind of listen to the beginning of this.
Juliet 3, 17 Bravo 3, 17 Bravo 4.
Juliet 3, we have possible, it could be fire because I think we got shots fired. Possible shots fired. 1,200 buildings.
Attention all units in District 15, possible shots fired at 5901 Pine Island Road at Stoneman Douglas High School. Possible shots fired at Stoneman Douglas High School.
And the 2 are out. 1584 out. Juliet 3, make sure we get some units over here. I need to shut down Stoneman Douglas. The intersection.
Time 4.
2 Bravo on my phone.
Time 4.
Thank you for what's the address?
5901 Pine Island.
We're talking about the 1200 building. It's going to be the building off of Holmberg Road. Any questions? I'm coming up on 1 middle. We don't have any description yet. We just hear shots, but there appear to be shots fired. I'm over on the south side, over by the 700 building. Daniel Jones shutting down eastbound Holmberg at the divide between Blaze and the high school. 17 Bravo 1, I'll get the west side of Stoneman on Holmberg.
Time 4, west side of Holmberg.
704 responding. Hey, Julie, what? Daniel, do I hear shots fired by the football field? Shots fired by the football field.
Shots fired by the football field. Heard.
Julie 3, we're looking at the 1200 building. It's going to be the 300 building. It's going to be right off of Holmberg Road by the senior lot. Keep the school locked down, gentlemen.
Attention all units now working at Signal 33. Go to Bravo channel for regular traffic.
Some sort of state they thought it was firecrackers or went out sure, by the football field. 26, so we also heard it over by inside the 1200 building. We're locking down the school right now. Make sure there's no pedestrian traffic anywhere on Holmberg Road. 59, 51, 51.
Unit advising 51.
15 Echo 2, and if we have any District 15 motor units, they can respond also. 15 Bravo 4 down, respond out, please.
Any unit not working at signal 33, go to Bravo.
Is going up, more students running west towards the football field. We're going to Bravo. I hear shots fired.
Shots fired. All units on the shots fired, stay on main.
Units right now. 1784, we definitely have shots being fired.
All District 7 units, go to Bravo.
Angle to the sergeant, right by the football field. Make sure I have a unit over in the front of the school. Make sure nobody comes inside the school.
I need a unit to the front, advise.
Bravo 3, we need somebody to shut down Holmberg at Pine Island.
Unit to shut down Holmberg, advise.
Holmberg shut down west one of building 13 of the 900 building. We have shots fired. I'm trying to get the fence open.
Building 13 and 900 building.
Do not approach the 12 or 1300 building. Stay at least 500 feet away at this point.
Stay away from 12 and 1300 building.
1704, I have a parent tell me that there is a child down. Have fire and rescue stage in the area so we can make contact. The parent told me there is a child down. Have them at stage. Daniel, I got a victim with a gunshot to the right leg. There's a gunshot to the right leg. Show me the west end of the high school on the football field.
GSW right leg, west end by the football field.
15 active to the Yankee net, for an active shooter response from 97. 17 Juliet 5, I have the gunshot victim. I have the gunshot victim. He's by the entrance to Westlake on the west side of the school.
10-4, fire rescue is being notified.
Gary, does he know where the shooter is? We don't know, but we're in the building, part of the 13 building, building 13. 17 Kilo 4, myself, Brandon.
So we can see the response was fairly quick in the sense that they got the area locked down. You can see, I pulled up a map of the high school. You can see how big the campus is.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to note is that, and I went to a high school that had this. I know many do not, especially during then, years ago, but there was a main campus and there was a freshman building. So this all happened in the freshman building. So it's not really talked about, and there's not really anything that tells us how the students and teachers in the main building were affected or reacted. But this did all happen in the freshman building, which at least in my school, there was a hallway that connected the two, but I'm not sure if this is more like a campus where you have to actually leave the building to go into the next one.
Yeah, it is. There are portions driving by the school. There are portions that like you would have to go outside to get to another building, kind of like a covered walkway. So they're like connected, but it's outside. And from how I understand the freshman building in juxtaposition of the campus, it was the same way. You can see it a little bit here. Wonder if we can even maybe get a street view to see a little bit better.
At least to the Arts Center, it looks like there's a hallway that connects, but it does look like it's kind of like a campus type.
I don't know how much you can see from street view. We'll see. This isn't too helpful.
Get all the way up.
This is a little bit of a poor, here's a newer.
So with this case, I'm just going to like briefly touch on this, but there was some law enforcement failures. So as great as it was that they got there so quickly and helped, when Nicholas Cruz was expelled, their FBI received multiple tips regarding him before the attack, and they were never followed up. There were many teachers, students, counselors that were concerned about his behavior and where that behavior might lead. And they did contact law enforcement and the FBI, but at that time, without a crime, there really isn't much that they're able to do. So nothing was followed up on and they weren't watching, but some of the warning signs were that there were threatening social media posts, violent behavior, a fascination with guns, animal cruelty allegations, statements about wanting to shoot people, and then, of course, those reports to the FBI. So there were multiple warning signs and warnings that were given to those individuals that are supposed to serve and protect and kind of follow up on those, and they were not, unfortunately. So that is a huge failure that occurred. And there was also a failure with, I guess we can go ahead and talk about it now, but there was a Broward County, which is the county that the school was in, the Broward County deputy that was commissioned to be at that school. His name was Scott Peterson, and he was an armed police officer. He was stationed at that school, and he was at the freshman building, and he was assigned to that campus, and whenever the shooting occurred, he did nothing. He did not enter the school. There is footage somewhere. I haven't seen it. I'm not sure if we were able to find it, but there is footage of him just outside of the building while the shooter is inside. It did go to trial. He was charged with child neglect, culpable negligence, and perjury for lying to police officers. So that is really heartbreaking because there is always going to be the question, if he were to have responded, would this have not happened? Would we have not had 17 victims that were killed and over 17 that were injured? So that kind of is heartbreaking, and he was acquitted of all charges. The jury determined that the prosecution was not able to choose or to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did anything wrong. The arguments were that Peterson didn't know where the shooter actually was. He claimed that over the radio, it sounded like he was outside of the building. Another defense core argument is that being wrong doesn't necessarily mean that there's a crime. So they did agree that he did not do the right thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he committed a crime. And then this was also the first major U.S. criminal prosecution for a charge like this. There hadn't been one in the past. So with it being one of the first major U.S. criminal proceedings for this charge, it's very hard to be able to go forwards because there's no case law that can be pulled that directly correlates to this charge to help prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this has happened in the past, and this is something that has been convicted. So he was acquitted of all charges. And then one to point out is the child neglect, which, in my opinion, would be the charge that really stuck, I guess, because he did neglect the children that were inside. It was hard to prove that because the big question was he considered a caregiver under the child neglect statute? So it was determined that he was not determined as a caregiver for those students. He was simply a police officer. However, did he neglect his duty and his oath as a police officer to serve and protect? That's a major question. And Brandon, I want to just kind of like start this conversation. Everyone feel free to jump in the chat and feel free to text us your name and where you're from to comment on this or to continue the conversation. But I want to ask, can a police officer be criminally prosecuted for not confronting a mass shooter? This doesn't necessarily even have to be a school shooting. This could be a mass shooter in general. We do have many, many cases of mass shootings and school shootings. So do we think that police officers can be convicted? Do we think that they can be criminally charged for not confronting a mass shooter? In my mind, that kind of makes you a coward. You have a duty to serve and protect.
Mm-hmm.
That is an oath that you take. You also do go through shooting and firearm training. You're required to as a police officer, and you're required to keep that license up to date. So you do that training multiple times. So I'm curious on what you think, Brandon. Do you think police officers can be criminally charged for not confronting a mass shooter?
No, absolutely. I do agree with that. I think Scott Peterson got off on this one, honestly. Let's take this scenario and put it somewhere else.
Okay.
Let's take and we could even lessen what it is as well. Let's say there is a robbery at a mall, an armed robbery at a mall, and let's say it's a high-end shoe store, high-end, clothing store, armed robbery. The police are going to show up. Regardless if there's a weapon or not, the police are going to go towards the threat. They're going to go towards the situation and clear out the people in direct harm. I think the same could be said for Parkland. He should have been going towards the threat. Now, I understand there was a discrepancy at the very beginning of where the shooter was, and there can be a little bit of, in a high stress situation that kind of can get misconstrued quickly, but that's also part of police training. That's part of law enforcement, to recognize the threat, regardless of being disoriented. So I do think police do have the responsibility to go towards an armed individual, especially when they're causing mass harm. We know Las Vegas, for example, I know that situation gets a little bit more complicated based on the perpetrator, where he was and where the actual incident was. You're talking
about the country festival.
Yes. Mm-hmm. At the Mandalay Bay in Las Vegas. That is a little more complicated, but we see even that body cam, the police are actively going floor to floor to recognize where the threat is. They're actively going towards the threat. They're not going away from the threat. Even units from outside of Las Vegas showed up to this event. And I'm not doubting that the same is happening in Parkland. I know Coral Springs, and I think Boca Raton also responded to this, but there was already quote unquote boots on the ground that should have been starting to begin the process of determining where the threat is. And that, in this case, did not happen.
And I kind of, do understand, I believe he was the only deputy there. So I can understand.
It does look like we're getting a call in. We can go ahead
good.
and take that real quick.
Go ahead.
Hello, thank you for calling Veiled Mysteries. Hello? I don't know if we have our caller here.
Hello?
See if we got him.
I heard him say hello, but I don't know if that was from the phone.
Hello? I don't know if we have our caller here. Let's go ahead. I'm going to try and call back really quick and see.
Do you have his number? I can text it to you if you don't.
Here.
You know who it is.
Let me see.
But one thing to point out is I will, as we're trying to figure out how to call you back. I do kind of understand if you're the only one there, that is very daunting to go in alone to put yourself in harm's way. However, we had teachers that did it. And they didn't have anything to help.
I think we have our caller back here. Hello?
Hello.
Oh, we got you now. Perfect. Thank you for calling Veiled Mysteries.
Yes, so on the security, the police officer out front, the resource officer, are they required to have any type of specific training to be able to work at a school to protect children?
I don't believe they do. I think that the only thing is the extensive firearm training that they get as an officer, but I don't think there's anything specific to be at a school.
So I guess then that would be the question: should somebody that is taking a job to protect children at a school, that should they be required to have some type of specialized training to be able to do that, to maybe weed out the people that are quote unquote cowards?
So
And
what kind of training do you think they would need or should get?
well, I mean, a lot of times you run into maybe you look for people that maybe have past combat training. They've been in the military, things like that. They've actually been trained. They've actually been trained for combat, not just at police officer school. And by no means am I up to date on what they go through at police officer school, but I don't know if these people are quote, maybe you get people that are maybe not necessarily a retired Navy SEAL or Special Forces person, but I don't believe that you should be able to have a 65-year-old retired overweight guy or whatever protecting out there, got 3 months until they retire, protecting the children.
Well, so then let me ask you this. Take away it being at a school, police officers don't necessarily have specialized trainings if they're called to, say, a shooting in the middle of the street in like downtown Orlando. They are just need to respond. So they're still going towards an active threat, and they don't have the specialized training.
But there's a difference. The radio people, that they're being dispatched, so they're on duty. A dispatch person is sending them there, and they're picking up. They're saying they're responding. You're dealing with somebody that's sitting at a school, and here's shots fired. There's nobody's. When the police got there, the police started going in for an active shooter. This guy had no dispatch telling him there was an active shooter. So this
he was
guy,
the one
whenever
that called.
he hid.
So the dispatch, they dispatched those officers to go, but that you said were on duty and dispatch. He was an officer that was on duty and already there. So.
But what I'm saying is, in my personal opinion, you don't want I don't want the person that is trying to collect an overtime check, or they're trying to do as minimal amount of work as they possibly can because they're that close to retirement. They've made it. That doesn't sound like the type of person that you want watching over the children. You want somebody that's going to go do something. And that's why, I don't know if there's specialty stuff that you can do to have somebody there that is not a coward watching the children.
It's a good thought. I mean, it makes sense. I understand a lot of times the deputies that are sent there as resource officers are retiring or are looking for an easy day. They don't want to get involved. So that's a really good point to bring up, which kind of it's a good segue for what we'll talk about next. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. If you'd like to join the conversation, our phone number is scrolling down at the bottom of the screen, 407-807-7204. We'll be taking calls for the next couple minutes, but we'll continue
And
our conversation here.
if you're joining in, or you joined in mid-conversation, but we are talking about the Parkland school shooting that happened February 14th of 2018 with Nicholas Cruz, who was 19 years old, expelled from that same high school and went back into the freshman building. 17 victims, unfortunately, killed, and over 17 were injured. So, talking to Sean, we talked about whether or not he had a civic duty to go in, and how a lot of times those resource officers are close to retirement, getting ready to retire, are wanting to take themselves out of the active line of duty. And so should there be specialized training for those officers that are sent to schools? So brings up a good segue for us. I want to talk about one thing that changed significantly for this case, from this case, is what is called the Chris Hickson, Coach Aaron Faze, and Coach Scott Beagle Guardian Program. So we kind of spoke about it earlier, but Coach Scott Beagle was killed, unfortunately, in this attack, protecting his students. And the other two were injured very badly for also protecting. So this Guardian program, its purpose is to place trained armed personnel on school campuses who can immediately respond to an active shooter before law enforcement arrives, my goodness. But with that being said, I believe personally that should have been Scott Peterson. He did take an oath. However, again, if he's close to retirement, if he's 65 or older, there are many things. I'm not sure. I didn't look up his age. He could be younger. He could be active, whatever. But I do believe that if you are a deputy and you are a resource officer somewhere and you are armed, you've gone through that training, otherwise you would not be armed, and you did take an oath, you should be those, as Brandon said, boots on the ground. However, this Guardian program was made so that we could have individuals that are not officers to respond. So who could be a guardian? A school employee who volunteers, a person hired specifically as a school guardian, certain licensed security personnel, and then those who complete the required training, which I'll talk about. So, like Sean said, he believed that there should be required training for this, for someone to go in to confront the active shooter, whether that be a retired, say, Navy SEAL, someone who is trained and has done this before. There is training for these guardians, which I do want to really emphasize because this is a big point. They are not officers of the law. They are not police officers. They have no authority to stop or prevent the assailant. They have no authority to arrest. However, they can, I guess, technically do a citizen's arrest, but they do not have that authority otherwise. So the training that they receive, which I do agree with Sean in this sense, I do believe that even those deputy officers that are commissioned and sent to schools should have this training as well. I think this should be required for anyone that is going to carry an armed, they are going to be armed, anyone that carries a weapon, anyone who is there to serve and protect should go through this training. So they have to go through extensive firearms training, active shooter response training, scenario-based exercises, psychological evaluations, drug screenings, background investigations, ongoing qualification requirements. So they do have to continually go through these. And then many programs require around 144 hours of training. So that's a lot of training. So I do believe and agree with Sean in the sense that anyone should have to go through this training, which if they're officers, I don't believe that they do. But if they're joining the Guardian program voluntarily, they do. So, Brandon, I want to throw out this question for you. Do you believe the outcome would have been different if a trained Guardian would have been stationed inside Building 12?
You know, it's hard to think of the what ifs in this scenario when so many lives were lost and altered. But I do think we could have seen something different come from this. I think there still would have been loss of life. I still think there would have been damage and carnage. But I think it would have been different even if just Scott Peterson acted when he should have. And I was thinking about this too. I've been so separated from high school life, and I've been out of high school for 10 years at this point.
10 years.
So it's hard to kind of think back, but even when we were in school, these, lockdown drills and things were routine, but it wasn't like there wasn't emphasis on it. At least when I was in school, the attitude around them and and what they really meant was so different. Because when I was in school, it was Columbine. It was, things that had happened several years ago that were still very harmful, and damaged communities, but was so much more different. I think social media plays a lot in this as well. But thinking back to my high school, shout out Collingswood High School, back in Collingswood, New Jersey, we had 2 officers, and I'm almost 100% sure at least one of them was armed. I could be mistaken on that, but they were both retired Camden City Police, which I lived right next to Camden, New Jersey, which is a pretty rough area. So having those resource officers in my school, knowing that they were retired from a rougher area, like there definitely was an energy that like we felt secure in school. And like I said, I can't remember if one of them was armed or not. I could be misremembering that. Like I said, it's been in several years. But even just having them in the school, I think the vibe and the energy was different. So I think if going back to this and Scott Peterson, I think if he had acted as he should have, with his oath and honor, we could have seen a difference. I still think it would have been devastating, but I don't know if we would have seen 17 lives taken.
I do want to point out one thing. We do have a chat coming in that says that the officer from Uvalde, he was charged. So this instance did happen also in that school shooting. The response time was much longer.
Yes.
In Uvalde than it was here. However, he was charged. I don't believe I even got into that case because I didn't research that case coming into the Parkland shooting episode we're doing. But I would imagine that they used this. I mean, he was acquitted, but I imagine that they used the same arguments and they did reference this case in that court case with the Uvalde officer. So that could be a potential reason why he was charged. But it also depends on if he was charged with the same charges of child neglect. So that could be a reason, just thinking outside the box there. I think it's interesting you brought up your high school, which I didn't even think about doing. So I'll kind of share my experience. So I went to Klein Oak High School in Spring, Texas. My high school was rough. I was definitely in a culture shock. I was not zoned to go to that school. I wouldn't say it was in a rough area necessarily. It was just very different from the elementary, middle school, and high school I was meant to go to, because it was farther away. Same school district, just I was not zoned there. I was in a program that I was able to go to that school to get I'll say a better education. But we did have armed officers. I'm not sure if they were retired or not, but I do know we had armed officers throughout the school. My school was very large. My graduating class was about 1,000 students. So if we just take that and say each class was 1,000 students, that's 4,000 kids in that school at one time, which is insane. It would take about the whole 7-minute walking period to go from the freshman wing all the way to the other building. So it was very large, and I will say we had a lot of fights. One of my first memories from that school is a fight that occurred outside of a classroom in the main building, not the freshman wing, but there were a lot of fights, and it was teachers who broke it up. It wasn't the officers that came. Granted, it wasn't anything fatal, but that did happen. And one thing I want to bring up, I think I've talked to you about this, Brandon. In 2012, we had that conspiracy that the world was going to end. There was a student at my school, which I heard this through the grapevine, word of mouth. Obviously, I did not know this student. I had never met this student. I didn't even know what he looked like. But there was a rumor going around that he was going to bring a weapon to the school, and there would be a mass shooting. Since the world was ending anyways, he thought he would just do it himself. So there was a rumor going around about that. I do remember I did tell my parents and was told to go to school. They're like, you're going to school, you're fine. My school had a lot of bomb threats, so much so that it was very normalized to order a pizza. We had Pizza Hut come and drop off pizzas all the time whenever we had bomb threats, because they lasted about 3 hours for them to go through the whole school. So everything was pretty normalized, and I kind of disassociated myself from that. So when I went to the school, I remember I was in my second period classroom, Organic Chemistry 2, and I was called to the vice principal. I was a good kid in school, never in trouble, never seen a principal, vice principal, nobody. And I was called in for him to reassure me that they had extra personnel on campus, and that my parents had called regarding this. Obviously, they wanted to inform someone. But I do think it's interesting because in the Parkland shooting case, there were tips that went, and nothing came of them. They did not look into them, but they had a parent call the school where I went to, and I was immediately called in to be reassured. So I think that's interesting. Granted, it was day of, and not there was a direct quote that says, I believe he will be a school shooter. That was a direct quote to the FBI. So I don't know if it just wasn't investigated because, there wasn't a date associated there. It was just this could happen. But I do believe that should have happened. Definitely.
Kind of getting back into the day's events, one thing that I found interesting with this was there was no standoff with police. We see, in Columbine from the library, they kind of had a shootout with police, or a couple other instances where they kind of have the perpetrator cornered.
Which normally is when it ends in suicide.
Right. And that's normally when...
Or murder by suicide.
Yeah, that's when the event
suicide
ends.
By murder,
what we saw here was Nicholas Cruz ended up evacuating with students, and he fled. Let me see if I can pull up the map again. He fled
because he pulled the fire alarm.
He
reminder.
Fled to the nearby area. There's a Walmart. Let's see if we can pull up the map here again.
Left his rifle and the bag with the ammunition and followed the students out.
Yeah, so he left everything there. You can see the school with the football field and then the Walmart where he went afterwards, just behind the high school here. He did end up going down the road to the McDonald's here, where he ended up meeting up with a student that had gotten out of the school. Ironically, I think it was his sister that was injured, this student that was at the McDonald's that he sat down at with Nicholas Cruz. to kind of talk about what was happening, and that's where he asked for a ride from that parent back to over by the school or back to his neighborhood, this side of the neighborhood. But what ensued was they'd kind of lost the shooter because he had got out with the students. And then there was a little bit of a foot pursuit where they were trying to determine where he went, and they did end up finding him. We do have that body cam footage. We'll kind of go through that. Things to note here, and we'll kind of discuss it afterwards, was Nikolas Cruz, and part of his defense is talking about these demons and these voices that he's listening to in his head. And we're going to kind of see a little bit of that foundation being laid in this body cam. I also do want to advise that there is some foul language. So if that is offensive to you, you may not want to watch this portion of the podcast, but we're gonna take a look at that body cam here.
I also don't think we have talked about it, but he did not receive the death penalty. He just received life in prison without parole, because at the time in the state of Florida, you had to have a unanimous jury conviction for the death penalty, and they did not.
All right, let's get started here.
Hey, body camera. Get the cars going.
So Brandon, I know you've watched this. This officer walking around, is he just...
That's it. I got a photo.
Right now they're just circulating the photo, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I got a photo here. Right now, they clear 2 minutes. Go forward, go forward. That's how you clear the body here. That's how you clear the body here. Proceed.
See his face.
We know what they're doing on the photo.
They're holding him down.
So this student right here, I believe, is... I do forget his name. I should have known that. But this student right here, he actually was injured so badly they don't know how he got out of the school. He was shot in the ankle, and then I believe he was shot one other place. But where he was shot in the ankle, he should not have been able to walk. It almost completely blew his ankle off, or blew his right foot off, and he stood up and ran out of that building and ran to where he is right now. So that is crazy. He really fought for his life, but that is who the student is right here.
And then we'll also see Nikolas Cruz pinned down by the authorities as well here.
I'm sorry, I can't listen deeper. So there's no fight with him.
We'll hear in just a moment this beginning of the voices, this kind of foundation work that he wants to use in his legal argument.
Check around, see if there's any backpacks or anything around.
There is some redacted audio here.
What's going on? What's going on today, bro?
The demons, man.
Demons? Voices and demons?
Where's the voices? What the fuck? Where the fuck am I? Holy shit. What happened?
Shut up.
Just be quiet, man.
I do want to point out that the only diagnoses that he had were ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ASD, he was on the autism spectrum, major depressive disorder, and then also fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, which they tried to argue was part of his reasoning. But no schizophrenia. Nothing to do with these demons and voices he's hearing. Yes, Amanda, the police did suspect him. They had his picture circulated as the suspect.
Hey, we're gonna hang out for 1 minute till the homicide guy gets here. Yep. Zach Scott's on the way. Yep. Leave everything. Yep.
And we can see he's also wearing, I think what was at the time like a formal polo for the school that other students would wear. That's how he got out of the school as well.
This was something that was brought up in the case, is that he didn't give any fight. He just
Yeah, we're not
kind
taking
of,
anywhere until Zach Scott gets here.
I guess, for lack of better terms.
Kilo 21, Baltimore. We have another show for just out there. Well, Carl, put him in. Put him in the car.
And then we pretty much just see him go back in the police car with not much else there.
Two other major Florida law changes that happened after the Parkland school shooting. The first one was they raised the minimum rifle purchase age from 18 to 21. And then the last one, which this one was the main change that happened, it's called a red flag law or a risk protection order. You can kind of think of it as a regular protection order, but it was passed in March of 2018, and this allows a court to temporarily remove a person's access to firearms if evidence shows they pose a significant danger to themselves or others. So the idea is to intervene before any violence occurs. So whenever those FBI tips came in, that's when this red flag law could have come into play. They could have made sure he had no firearms, he was not in any possession, he was not in a household with them, he could not purchase them. So that is a huge change that happened. And like really can make a difference. It can also be used for suicide prevention, so it's not just mass shootings, but if there is a significant threat of someone to themselves, this risk protection order can also take place. So that's something that's a main change that happened in Florida law. There is some individuals that are against this because it violates due process, also the Second Amendment, and firearms being removed before someone is actually convicted of a crime or possibly ever being convicted of the crime in general. Those are the main changes. And then, Brandon, you talked a little bit about social media, and I kind of also made a comment on how big social media was in this case. I want to kind of expand that into all recent mass shootings, school shootings, because I myself, thinking back, which I mean, I guess we're sheltered a lot whenever we're younger, but thinking back, I don't think I really understood or heard about a school shooting until maybe freshman year of high school. So my question to you and to everyone, please answer in the chat, call. What is the influence of social media on school shootings and the increase of them? Do we think that causes the increase? Do we think that should hold more of a significance of possibly putting in that risk protection order?
It looks like we have a call coming in. Let's go ahead and answer here. Hello, thank you for calling Veiled Mysteries.
Hi. Am I online?
Yeah.
I can't hear.
Oh, okay. I was wondering if in y'all's research you found a change in the legal response, in regarding school shooting in the time since Columbine. Like if there's been, like Taylor was just saying, the thing about the officer in Uvalde, the case in Uvalde referencing Parkland, if you've seen that kind of, sort of building on or precedent or setting of a precedent and building on that.
Is this Herb?
Yes, this is
Hey,
Herb.
so sorry, we were having difficulties. I couldn't hear you at all. Could you repeat just like the question part or all of it if you want to?
Yeah, I was wondering if in your research you found that there has been any kind of progression or change in the legal response to school shootings.
Do you mean in general or with like the officer that was commissioned at the school? Do you mean with them? Do you just mean in general?
I mean, like it in the legal arena, like the way you said that that the Uvalde case may have referenced Parkland. Is there, have there been other precedents like that? Which, basically, has there been any kind of like trend or progress?
So I think a big one, especially with this case in Florida, is the death penalty law. At the time, he did plead guilty, so there wasn't any question about whether or not he did this. But at the time, the Florida death penalty law had to be unanimous by the jury, and it was not. So that has now changed to an 8-4 vote, which I do believe that if that were the case, he would have received the death penalty at the time. So that is a huge change that happened. And then, like I said, and you kind of commented in the chat about the Uvalde case, the Scott Peterson and him being acquitted was created a major precedent, for other cases that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another huge one. The death penalty and the Scott Peterson case are the two main precedents that have changed and have made a huge difference going forwards in school shootings.
And obviously there's, as many policies as there are school districts, or at least as many states, I'm sure.
What was the last?
Thank you for all this interesting stuff to think about.
Yeah, thanks for calling in, Herb.
Thank you so much. We still have our phone line open if you want to call. That's going to be 407-801-7204.
Those are great points
Yeah.
that he brought up that I don't think a lot of people think about. When someone is acquitted of a crime, a lot of times those cases are used as precedent in other cases, which basically means that if there is a similar case or a case where even bits and pieces have happened in that acquittal, they can use those. The defense can use them as well as the prosecutor. So it can be used either way, to either help prosecute someone or to help get someone off by stating that that person was acquitted of that same crime, or these things have already happened, we need to change how things are going forwards. So not a lot of people think about that. They just think, oh, they're acquitted, that's it, it's over, and it's not. It still goes through major legal channels and is used in other cases. So with the social media, Brandon, do you think that has caused an increase? Or another big thought is a lot of times social media that is covered under the First Amendment.
Right. And outside of the First Amendment, I think a lot of what we're seeing, and I feel like there's definitely a pattern even outside of school shootings and just mass shootings in general, we're seeing this online radicalization take place on more obscure community websites like 4chan and Reddit, where we're seeing anger play out in a way online where it's not regulated is not the right word I'm looking for, but it's not monitored the same way that, for example, someone talking to a stranger online, there's no one to put a stop to that. They can kind of self-radicalize and they can kind of feed off of each other, whether that be just anger or general mental illness. And we're kind of seeing this egg on culture as well. They're like, well, if so-and-so can do this much damage here, I can do more damage, or, there's kind of like a one-up, there's copycats, and we're seeing that all play out online. For the average Facebook user, for the average user on X, you might not really see that because that's regulated and what you're following is kind of curated to you. But the people that are getting on these subreddits, on these 4chan forums, they're actively seeking it out. And I think a larger investigation of mental illness also plays into the social media aspect as well.
There is a chat that states that in terms of social media, they believe it had an impact. The online bullying is one way, but also making these shooters infamous. And I think that, especially that last part, if there's, say, a copycat, and they looked at Nicholas Cruz and how he did it, they could look up to him potentially and say, well, look how many people he injured and killed, and he pulled the fire alarm. That's a great idea. And kind of boost off of that. And I think that's very harmful. Social media can be great, but it also can be very, very scary. And that's kind of tough. It's a tough situation, but I don't remember hearing about school shootings when I was younger, and social media didn't really become a big play until, at least for me, until high school. That's when, Twitter, now referred to as X, I believe. Yeah. That's when Twitter came out, and that's when Facebook got big. They kind of moved away from MySpace. But growing up, MySpace was really the only thing that I can remember. And so going in and having all of these different social media avenues, Snapchat, Instagram, those really can make a difference because people can go on and they hide behind a computer screen. They hide behind their keyboard and they can say pretty much whatever they want. And it's scary because you don't know that person. Nicholas Cruz could have been the person in school who was very to himself, didn't really talk to anyone, didn't have a lot of friends, and wasn't perceived. I mean, clearly he was at the end because when he was expelled, there were tips. But I mean, during his time at school before that, he could have just been overlooked. And I think that's a lot of school shooters is they're individuals that are just kind of overlooked. They aren't, a lot of times you hear, I never would have thought they would do this.
Mm-hmm.
I never could have imagined they were capable. And I think that also goes to show you just don't know what's going on inside someone's head and inside behind the keyboard even.
Mm-hmm.
So I think social media is crazy and really can and does have a big influence on the increase of mass shootings in general, not just school shootings.
Mm-hmm. And I do believe we've seen instances in other shootings. I want to say in the synagogue shooting that happened a couple years ago, there was video that was released that referenced other perpetrators. So there definitely is like a copycat, a sort of like idolization of the perpetrators amongst other perpetrators. And it's something that we continue to see again and again, I think.
Amanda brings up a good point. She says all press is good press. And that is a good point, and that is something that is circulated a lot. But I think it's very hard to convict or even to use social media as an excuse for like the prosecution to say, well, here's what they were posting on social media, because it is covered by the First Amendment right. It is very, very difficult to prove and to be able to even keep it in trial and as discovery, something that was posted on social media.
Amanda said social media glorifies it almost, and it sometimes people forget it's actual real life and not just online. That's also a good point. I think it's hard sometimes for people to even connect to these situations that happen in these mass events because you're kind of just seeing it play out online on a screen and through the news, and behind it is communities that are affected. There's families that have experienced loss. So it is hard to kind of wrap your head around it. And I think kind of to tie back when I was down in that area, to kind of be there in that area for something that I remember when this happened when I was in college. I was going into my third year of college when this happened, and kind of hearing about the changes that happened in Florida and the different laws that kind of went into place, and then being in front of the school after all these years of like kind of following it online. There's a sense of real damage, like going past these places, even, if you're an Orlando local, going downtown and kind of passing the area of Pulse, there's a heaviness in the area that it makes it very real. And it's hard for people to kind of feel that when these things are kind of happening, and there's spans of time where we're having multiple things happen in a week, and we're kind of, we're so sorry for your loss, and it's on to the next one. And it's sad to see it play out that way.
There's a good point in the chat that says, as a parent, this correlates to the video games our kids play. They take the realness away from the act and remove the feeling of something being wrong, which is a huge point. A lot of, at least high school, but I'm sure younger kids as well, I personally did not partake, but a lot of high school kids play these violent video games. And
Well, looks like we have a phone call coming in.
Good.
Go ahead and take that. Hello, thank you for calling Veiled Mysteries. Hello? Getting some broken up audio here. Let's see. Might have lost the caller. Let's see if I can make a call back.
We're having difficulties with this phone. Bear with us.
There we go.
There we go.
Perfect.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, I don't. So my question is, and I know that it would take a law change, but currently, social media companies, the platforms, they can't be treated as a publisher or a speaker of content created by their users. But I guess the question is the content harmful that they're publishing? That they can't be treated as a publisher because they're not the ones doing it. But you know, a lot of times these killers, they go on these platforms and they're mentally disturbed anyway, but they're using the platform as a media to get a voice, and they want everybody to know what they're going to do, and if they're suicidal, or maybe in the real world they're not noticed by people. They go to school and nobody sees them, nobody talks to them, they don't have friends. But when they get home and they get behind their keyboard, and then there's somebody, they have an alter ego, they have another persona, and people are able to do stuff online and say whatever they want to say, and then in the real world, they're not taken seriously, they're not given the time of day. And so the question would be, should the law be changed to be able to moderate or monitor the content that's being posted, and instead of how it was during the COVID area, and back when the social media platforms were starting to restrict speech because they had moderators. If the social media company was held accountable for allowing harmful language to be posted, i.e., somebody saying they are going to go shoot up a school, and they actually go shoot up a school, that should the social media platform, should the law be changed to hold them accountable? Because if these people didn't have a platform to be able to get people to listen to their what's happening with them and what they want to do, and it wasn't sensationalized, then maybe it would stop a lot of it from happening. I don't know what y'all's thoughts on that are.
No, I agree. I think that they should be required to have a moderator that kind of watches the content and can take content down. However, playing on the other side of that argument is there's so much content that goes on. How can they monitor it all? They can't. It's at all times. It's worldwide.
But if they were treated as a publisher of content, if the law was changed and they were treated as a publisher of content, then they would have to figure out an algorithm
to monitor,
or something in order to monitor it.
No, I agree.
And
I
that's
think
what
that
I'm
it
saying.
should be. I think that it should be like that. I think that they should have moderators that go through and kind of filter through.
Well, but do you think that the news media also plays a role in it? Because, back in the 70s and 80s, you know, you would watch the 5 o'clock news or the 6 o'clock news when you got home from work, and they would talk about stuff that's going on in your local community. And it wasn't until the 90s or the late 80s, early 90s when the O.J. Simpson trial started happening. And before the trial started happening, when the murder happened, it wasn't the first time that happened, but it was the media was filming the Bronco driving down the road, and they were sensationalizing what was happening. They were speculating, and it was a 24-hour news thing. And so where I'm going with this is nowadays that is the norm. You can watch news 24 hours a day, and if there's a good car chase going on, if there's a good active shooter at a school, the news media has the coverage going 24/7. And do you think that sensationalizes things, and so somebody that goes into a school with a weapon knows that they're going to get their 15 minutes of fame? They're going to be plastered on all the networks all across the United States, and everybody's going to know who they are. Everybody's going to know that they're in there with a weapon. Everybody's going to take them seriously. And so does the media play a role in these horrible crimes that are happening, because these people know that it's going to get covered, and they're going to get their airtime?
Well, and I think it's interesting you say that, because a lot of times with crimes, especially mass shootings and even just regular murders, it's happened where it ends in suicide. A lot of times it's because they want their 15 minutes of fame. They get it, they've done what they came there to do, and they're done.
But if we didn't glorify it,
correct.
And I think that we're as guilty sometimes as the person that's doing it, because, you know, we want to hear it. You know, we're calling people. Do you see what's going on? Do you see that there's a shooter here? I mean, it's sad to say, but sometimes it's just as exciting for the people hearing about the story. And, you know, and
yeah, it's exciting because they feel like they're a part of it, and they're not in danger. They're not the ones that are fearing for their lives, but they feel as if they're a part of it, and they are in it. And I think that goes back to the O.J. Simpson trial. Whenever, especially the Bronco chase, people were watching that, live streaming it, and they felt like they were there. They were involved. They were there. And I think that is a huge thing, is whenever things are live streamed or whenever things are happening right then and there, you are involved at that point. You want to know what happens. You are ready for the outcome, and you are ready to hear it. It is very sad to say, but how it's progressing, what's happening, and it is exciting. And that's a terrible word to say, and it's terrible to reference it like that, but it is exciting to kind of feel as if you are involved. And so, yeah, we are a huge part of the problem, and it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately, as humans, and Brandon and I look at cases all the time. We are constantly going back and forth. Did you hear about this? Oh my gosh, look at this.
Right.
And so as bad as it is, and as much of the problem that we are, it can also be argued that we are doing it and we are wanting to be involved to show the narrative, in my opinion, the correct narrative of what happened, and not glorify the perpetrator, but glorify the victims and the heroes, and push that narrative, not the narrative of the active shooter or the murderer.
Yeah, I just thought that that was just something that I thought of about that. It just seems like that as a society, you know, just as the shooter might sensationalize what's happening. I think us as viewers, we are also sometimes guilty of, you know, we can't wait to hear what happens. And sad to say, the gorier, the better. You know, the more outrageous, the more outlandish, the better. And I think that it's the one-up scenario of, you know, these people doing these crimes, you know, because the Columbine, you know, shooting was so horrific that, you know, these kids are going in there and they have to one-up them. And, you know, are we as a society glorifying what's happening by what we're allowing to be put on media, the news media, and what we're allowing to come across our news feeds on social media? So I just thought I would throw that out there to see what y'all's thoughts were on that.
I think that's a great point, and I think it's something good to keep in the back of your mind whenever you're going on social media or whenever you hear about things that happen. It's a good thing to think about. So I think that was a great thought that you called in with. So thanks so much, Sean.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Thanks.
So I think there was a good point made there that, you know, the media also kind of plays a role in all of this, for better and for worse. You know, there is a aspect of people wanting to understand and, I guess, be involved in the sense that they know what's going on. And it can be to the detriment of everybody.
I agree.
Did you have any final thoughts regarding the trial of Nikolas Cruz?
I mean, I go back and forth on my thoughts on the death penalty. Sometimes I think in some cases it's too easy. It's an easy way out. And in some cases, I believe that it should have happened. In this case, it's hard because he was only 19 years old. So, I mean, he's a kid. He has his whole life ahead of him. However, he knew what he was doing. He went in with a plan. It was complete first-degree murder. And he was actually charged with 34... So sorry. He was charged with 34 consecutive life sentences. So that is the victims as well as the injured. So it's hard because part of me, in this case, I think the death penalty would have been appropriate. But on the flip side, he was young. But I don't know if it would have made a difference. In some cases, I believe that the death penalty is too easy and that they should have to live and sit for the rest of their lives and think about what they did and really sit with that. But in this case, I don't think it would have made a difference. I don't think him being in there and not being eligible for parole, I don't think there is much of a difference between him doing that and getting the death penalty.
Yeah, I have interesting thoughts and feelings about the death penalty as well. I don't know how I feel about it. I do feel like it's the easy way out for certain things. I also think from a religious perspective, I don't know if we have, if we are able, right, to take life because someone else took life. So I think there's a couple different things that I kind of think about when I think about the death penalty. So I don't have an opinion on it. I don't know what my feelings are on it, but I think in this scenario, the death penalty probably would have made more sense. But at the same time, he's so young, he's gonna be rotting there forever. I think the death penalty, like you said, is kind of an easy way out though.
Yeah, I agree.
Did you have any final thoughts about the case in general?
Just in general, I want to make sure that we are remembering those victims and their families. They were also very young whenever this happened. The injured will never get over this, unfortunately. This is something they will live with for the rest of their lives, and I applaud those who have, I don't want to say gotten over it, but have learned how to live their life through it. But I do want to really just remember this is about the victims as much as we are talking about the shooter. We are showing this case and really putting it out there to show how it changed Florida law, and that is in the benefit of those victims. They were, unfortunately, their lives were taken, but they are the reason that this law has been changed. So I just want to remember those victims and really keep that in the forefront of our minds.
Of course, and I do want to reiterate that as well. At the end of our program, we do have a tribute to the victims of the Parkland shooting. So we do encourage you to stay throughout that. This broadcast is dedicated to the families and those victims, of course. Thank you so much, Taylor, for being a part of this episode and covering this with me. This is one that I have really been looking forward to because obviously we can see there's a very spirited conversation that we were able to have with our guests between each other. And obviously there's so much more work ahead in terms of gun violence in public settings. But hopefully, you know, even just watching this can start a positive conversation and debate amongst friends and family that are watching tonight. So thank you, Taylor, for being a part of this.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And thank you so much for spending a little bit of your evening here with us tonight. Next week, Taylor and I will be diving into the mysterious and much unexplored territory of the Florida Everglades. Actually, it's going to be the week after, so stay tuned. From lost Confederate gold to the humankind ape that lurks into the shadows, the Florida Everglades holds many secrets and lore that radiate through the entire Sunshine State. We look forward to sharing more with you in 2 weeks, Monday at 8 p.m. Veiled Mysteries, of course, is live every Monday at 8 p.m. in the East, 7 p.m. in the Mid-Region, and 6 p.m. on the West. Make sure to follow me on Instagram at Veiled Mysteries Pod for updates and to stay in touch. If you have a true crime case or conspiracy theory you'd like to see us cover, feel free to email or message me at veiledmysterytips@gmail.com. As always, ask questions, stay curious, and be informed. I'm Brandon Ward. Have a good night.